In the world of true crime, we often talk about cold cases. But for Jim Walker, the case of his sister wasn't just cold, it was frozen in time for nearly half a century. It began with a promise, a rose-shaped ring, a Valentine's Day dance, and a future that was stolen in the blink of an eye.
It meant a lot to me. It meant, I'm here, I'm yours, and I promise you. She opened it up and I could see the smile.
For 46 years, the killer walked the same streets as the family he destroyed. He shopped at the same grocery stores. He slept in a warm bed, while 17-year-old Carla Walker lay in a dark concrete tunnel. It was February 17th, 1974. In Fort Worth, Texas, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and late winter rain. For 17-year-old Carla Walker, the night felt like the beginning of the rest of her life. She was a cheerleader, a girl with a smile that could light up the dim hallways of Western Hills High School. Beside her was Rodney McCoy. He wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her protector, or so he thought. Earlier that evening, at the Valentine's Day dance, Rodney had reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a promise ring, a gold rose. To a teenager in 1974, that ring wasn't just jewelry, it was a contract. It was a vow that no matter where life took them, they would face it together. But as they sat in Rodney's car in the parking lot of the Brunswick Feelings bowling alley, the together they imagined was about to be violently torn apart. Imagine the silence of that parking lot, the hum of the heater, the soft music on the radio, then the sudden deafening crack of a car door being ripped open. A man stood there. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a shadow. In his hand was a Ruger 22 pistol. Before Rodney could even utter a word of protest, the heavy steel of the gun barrel smashed into his skull. One hit. Blood began to fill Rodney's eyes, blinding him. He felt himself slipping into the gray haze of a concussion. He heard the man struggling with his weapon. The stranger was preparing to finish him off.
I didn't even get a look at the guy's face. Finally, she said, stop hitting him, I'll go with you. He had put his hand inside the car and stuck the pistol about 3 or 4 inches from my face and started pulling the trigger.
She was doing what she thought she needed to do to make sure Rodney did not get shot. So I think she sacrificed herself.
I see Carla's face and she screams, Rodney, go get my dad. I was terrified. And that's the last word I heard her say. That's the last time I saw her. I went out face first in the seat.
With those 5 words, Carla Walker walked into the darkness, trading her future for Rodney's life. As the car sped away, the last thing Rodney heard was the sound of gravel spraying against the wheel wells. And then, silence. For the next 3 days, Fort Worth held its breath. The police launched a massive dragnet. They searched fields, abandoned buildings, and creek beds. But the discovery, when it came, was a nightmare that no one was prepared for. Just outside of town, near Benbrook Lake, there was a concrete cattle culvert, a dark claustrophobic tunnel designed for drainage. It was there, in the damp shadows, that they found her. Carla had been kept alive for hours. She had been tortured. She had been staged. But the most haunting detail wasn't what the killer did. It was what he left behind. Right there, in the mud next to Carla's body, sat the promise ring, the gold rose. Why? Did he take it as a trophy and drop it? Or did Carla, in her final moments of life, rip it from her finger and throw it into the dirt as a final message to Rodney, a way of saying, I kept my promise? The investigation was a frenzy. Detectives found a magazine for a Ruger pistol at the scene. They began tracking down every Ruger owner in North Texas. They eventually knocked on the door of a man named Glenn McCurley. He was 31 years old, a family man, a truck driver. He admitted he owned a Ruger, but claimed it had been stolen. They gave him a polygraph. In 1974, these machines were seen as infallible. McCurley's heart rate stayed steady. His breathing didn't falter. He passed. The police moved on. They went back to Rodney McCoy. They pressured him. They suspected him. The town began to whisper that the hero boyfriend was actually a killer. Broken by the loss and the accusations, Rodney eventually packed his bags and moved to the furthest place he could find, Alaska. The case of Carla Walker didn't just go cold, it froze solid. While the police files gathered dust, Carla's younger brother Jim was growing up in a house filled with ghosts. He was only 12 when his sister was taken. He remembered the screech of the tires. He remembered his mother's death scream when the news came. Jim Walker became a man obsessed. While his friends were out at parties, Jim would drive to that cattle culvert. He would crawl inside. He would lie down in the exact spot where his sister's body had been found. He wanted to know what she felt. He wanted to know what she smelled. He was waiting. He was convinced that a killer always returns to the scene of the crime. "I was going to take care of him right there," Jim later said.
At the time, I used to sleep in the culvert where her body had been found, hoping her killer would return to the scene of the crime, and I was going to take care of him right there.
See, and I wanted to see it. I wanted to know if my sister was still alive when she went into that place, what she saw, what she smelled, how it felt. It was cold, but I just wanted to experience that.
Jim decided the only way to get justice was to become the law. He enrolled in the police academy. He excelled. He was a sharpshooter. But then, the world began to blur. He was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder. Slowly, the light began to fade from his world. By the time he was in his 30s, Jim Walker was legally blind. He had lost his sister. He had lost his career. And now, he had lost his sight.
Part of my life experience has led me to living with legal blindness. Prognosis is irreversible, and that it will probably only get worse.
But Jim Walker didn't need eyes to see the truth. Every single year, on the anniversary of Carla's death, he would pick up the phone. He would call the cold case unit. For decades, the answer was always the same. "We have no new leads, Jim. We're sorry." But in 2020, 46 years after the dance,
I asked her, "How many cold cases do you have?" And she said, "We have 971 unsolved murders." I said, "Man, my heart bleeds for all 971 of those families. But right now, I only care about one case." I said, "Whoever did this is either dead, dying, we're running out of daylight." And I said to her, "I want the truth."
a woman named Leah Wagner picked up the phone. She was a new kind of detective, and she was about to discover that the killer had left behind a ghost of his own. Detective Wagner went back to the original evidence boxes. Inside, she found Carla's clothing. It had been sitting in a box for nearly half a century. Using technology that didn't exist in 1974, she sent a sample to a lab in Houston. The sample was microscopic, just 5 nanograms of male DNA. To give you an idea of how small that is, a single grain of salt weighs about 50,000 nanograms. This was their only shot. If the test failed, the DNA would be destroyed. The results came back. It wasn't Rodney. It wasn't any known criminal in the system. But when they ran the profile against a genealogy database, it pointed to a family tree, and at the end of one branch was a name they had seen before. Suspect number 22, Glenn McCurley. He was now 77 years old. He was living just miles from the original crime scene. He had spent 46 years watching his children grow up, eating Sunday dinners and celebrating his own anniversaries, all while the Walkers suffered. The police didn't have enough for a warrant, so they followed him.
You, Mr. McCurley?
I am.
And Mr. McCurley?
He's in the back.
Mr. McCurley?
I ain't doing anything.
They watched him go to a McDonald's. They watched him throw a straw into the trash. That straw held the secret. The DNA matched the sample from Carla's clothing with a probability of 1 in 1.4 quadrillion.
I've never seen her, never met her, never talked to her. I wouldn't know her if she was standing beside of me.
Your DNA was on her body. It is evidence that does not lie. What we're saying, Mr. McCurley, is that your DNA was found on Carla Walker, okay? So there's no question about it. Can you tell us what happened?
How did you kill her?
I just choked her.
You've been holding on to that for a long time.
I can remember Detective Wagner saying, "We got him." I cried, and then I called Rodney. I said, "We got him." And there was a pause, and Rodney said, "Got him?" And I said, "Yep, we got him, buddy. We know who did this to you and Carla." And Rodney started crying.
When they arrested him, McCurley didn't fight. He was tired. But the most shocking moment wasn't the arrest. It was the trial. Jim Walker sat in the front row. He couldn't see McCurley's face, but he could feel the presence of the man who had haunted his dreams for 46 years. And in a move that stunned the courtroom, Jim didn't ask for the death penalty. He didn't scream for vengeance. Instead, he approached McCurley's son. He saw a man whose world had just been shattered by the realization that his father was a monster. Jim reached out and hugged him. "You don't own the sins of your father," Jim whispered. At that moment, Glenn McCurley broke. He changed his plea to guilty. He admitted everything. Today, Rodney McCoy is back from Alaska. He has the promise ring back in his possession. And Jim Walker, the blind brother who never gave up, finally found the light. Because even in the darkest tunnels, if you wait long enough, the truth always finds its way home.
Of who killed teenager Carla Walker in Fort Worth ended, and it happened suddenly. Here's our Jason Allen.
Before a third day of testimony in his murder trial could even start Tuesday, Glenn McCurley stopped it. He changed his plea to guilty for killing 17-year-old Carla Walker in 1974. Judge Elizabeth Beach immediately sent him to prison for life, and families finally let emotions show in the courtroom.
Rodney, on behalf of the Fort Worth Police Department and the Walker family, we'd like to give you back Carla's ring so you can have a piece of it.
I'm indebted to them forever. What they did for me is pretty amazing.
Wow, so much. I remember exactly.
So unexpected. That was so heartfelt. I got a little piece of my heart back, and it just means so much to me.